Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Bates. This is the Rabbit Room Apologetics Podcast, and let's get into this. So, last time we talked about, we were doing a really deep dive into Genesis, and some question: why am I taking it this long? But the rationale is very obvious. The entire Bible and all of our theology is essentially based on how we view Genesis. Now, I'm not saying that my way of viewing Genesis is correct. I'm saying it is one way backed by a lot of research and hundreds of academics who think very similarly to me on many of these issues. So I'm not alone, but this may not be what most people are used to hearing from the pulpit. And that's because I'm not a preacher. And I'm a theologian, and I'm trying to teach it that way. So stick with me a little bit. I'm not saying I'm right. What I want you to take from all of this, though, is that I want to expand your horizons. See, our God is so great that you do not need a small, literal view of the Bible to understand Him. You can understand Him in many different ways and expand that out. And so I'm trying to just expand your horizons out so you can see some of this. All right. So when we let go here, or when we stopped last time, we were talking about the expanse, right? Heaven and earth, and there was evening, morning, second day. And we talked about how the worldview of the Hebrews was one of this vision of the earth being in the center, and then there were heavens, and there were waters above and below, and there was this firmament. And the one thing I wanted to make sure you understood was that the word used for firmament in Genesis, rakia, is the same word used when describing the tabernacle, right? And that's a key thing. You got to keep all these things tied together. Okay, so that was evening and there was morning the second day. So let's move on here. We're now at verse 9. And once again, if you like what I'm showing you here, this is Logos software. This is the way I've got it configured for my own use, right? And this is the Bible software I use. If you want to use it, I will provide a link that provides you a discount and a free trial. You can look into it. You don't have to use it. This is just something that you might want to think about using. Because if you want to do some stuff I'm doing, Logos is the only software I know that does this the way I'm showing it to you, right? Okay. Verse 9, and God said, and what I'm reading from is the ESV, and as you can see, this is an interlinear here, so I'm showing you the Hebrew, the underlying Hebrew underneath each English word. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, right? And God saw that it was good. All right. There's actually quite a bit here we need to unpack. Okay, so the first thing is the word that you'll see here when God says, gathered the seas together, right? That they were gathered here is mikveh, right? Some of you may know that term. And mikveh is the term used of the ritual baths, right? So another time this is used quite often is when it's talking about the baths where people needed to immerse themselves to relieve themselves of ritual impurity. So think about this, right? We've already got the fact that God built, right, the heavens and the earth, and he had a raka, a firmament above. And when he had Moses build the tabernacle, he had to build a firmament. Well, one of the things you have available to all the Israelites, especially before they were to come to the temple, right, or to the tabernacle, right? They needed to cleanse themselves. They needed to immerse in a mikveh. You want a real good picture of this? I don't know if you've seen things 2 seasons ago on The Chosen. I like The Chosen. There are pros and cons to it, but I like what they've done there. There is a scene where Eden visits a rabbi, and she's talking about the problems she's having with Peter, and he suggests that she goes and does a cleansing, and she goes into the mikveh pool, right? And this is the scene where Peter is on the lake with all the apostles and in the storm, and Jesus walks on the water and pulls them out of the water, right? Okay, so a couple very big things are happening in The Chosen. Well, this mikveh pool here, this immersion is very important, right? And when you think about all the times in, especially like the New Testament, where they talk about what is the Greek word that often gets replaced, mikveh gets replaced with. Well, one is a word just simply meaning a bathing location. That's a noun. But what we're looking for is the verb. When you want to get that ritual immersion, right, to cleanse. In Greek, that word is baptizo. And of course, that's where we get our word baptism. So this is not a foreign concept to the Jews of the Second Temple period, nor is it a foreign concept to the Greeks and to the church, right, to the Christian church. This idea of baptism or mikveh being a cleansing, an immersion, and a cleansing. And so we see that starting right from the beginning here in Genesis, right? In 1:10. So we start there. The other thing is when we see the word sees here, right? It's mayim, or yamim here, because the way it's conjugated, but it's mayim. And the one thing with the mikveh is it had to have what's called mayim hayim, or living water, right? It couldn't just be a pool that you filled up. It had to be a pool that water from not a cistern, but from like a river or a stream or something, came in and filled the pool continuously, right? That was a very important part. So when you look at all of the stories in what happened in the temple, like the pool of Siloam and others, those pools had to actually be living water. They had to have a spring or a river or something that brought them in. When John the Baptizer baptized, right, especially when he baptized Jesus, right, it was in the River Jordan, right? You needed to have that pool. As much as possible, it had to be living water, right? And so that was one of the requirements. And we see it right here, right from the very beginning, with the seas are gathered together they're gathered a mikveh, a baptizo, right, which is the verb, right, the gathering. And then what you get is living water after that. And so God is essentially cleansing the world in this creation story, okay? And God saw that it was good. Now, I do have a little note here that I put in. And once again, we're going to get a little bit into Hebrew here. Hope you like a little bit of this Hebrew view. And English speakers often use the word hope to express speculative desires. I hope that I get the job, or I hope we win this game. In these contexts, we invoke hope as we close our eyes, cross our fingers, and wait for the best possible conclusion to an unsure situation. But this is not what the Bible means when it speaks of hope, right? In Hebrew, hope, right, tikvah, is associated with God. Same root word as mikvah, right, is associated with God, so that the term expresses confidence, not in a future outcome, but in a present divine strength. According to the Psalms, hope is decisive because it comes from God. Only for God does my life wait silently. For from him comes my hope, my tikvah, my or the conjugation, tikvati, right? He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, and I shall not be shaken. Psalm 62, 5-6, right? So this idea of hope is not something that we're wishing for. It is what we're putting our firm foundation into, right? We know the how God, right, values us, and we know the character of God. And so our hope is not that we're hoping that this will happen, but we are placing ourselves in full faith with God. So that's very important. When you're asking God for something, is it really within His character that you should have that, right? Right? Having your favorite football team might be something you hope for, and you might even say, I'm praying for it. But the question is that really something God is going, I don't know. I mean, I don't think so, but is God really going to get involved in that unless there's some greater good there that we don't know about? But my hope is in my salvation. I'm not hoping I get salvation. I am placing my firm faith in the salvation that was promised to me, that is the character of God that I'm accepting, okay? So you want that. The Hebrew word for hope is the same word for pooling or gathering together. Once again, it's the same root, right? Mikvah, tikvah. The Bible uses mikvah when God gathers together the waters at creation. God called the dry ground land, and then the gathering, the mikveh of waters, the mayim, that living water, the seas, he called seas, right? Jeremiah connects this gathering of waters with his hope in God. Lord, the hope of Israel, the mikveh of Israel, all who forsake you shall be put to shame, for they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters, the mayim, right? So once again, we're pulling all these pictures together, right? That's Jeremiah 17:13. The hope that Jeremiah has in God recalls God's strength as the creator. Just as surely as God gathered, right? Mikvah, the waters, mayim, the living water, in the past. Jeremiah describes God as his present hope, the mikveh, right? Living water, mayim. In biblical parlance, hope is not an abstract wish, but rather a complete assurance in God's strength to sustain all things. So as we pray for the salvation of people we know, the salvation of Israel, the salvation of people, right, of the nations, we have full faith in God and in his character. We're not wishing for this to happen. We know the character of God. We know what he has promised us. Okay. Another tool, once again, and I show this a lot because I think it's a wonderful tool that's built into here, which is the study assistant. It's essentially the AI that's being built into this. This is a preliminary version still, right? I asked about, do you know the words to tikvah, the Israeli national anthem? And this is very important because you may not know what the words are to the national anthem of Israel, right? But tikvah expresses the enduring Zionist aspiration through these words. As long as deep in the heart the soul of a Jew yearns, so long as the eye looks eastward toward Zion, our hope is not lost. The 2,000-year hope to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem, right? So this was a poem, and it was written in 1887, sorry, not 1987, in 1887 by Naftali Hertz Embar, right? And was put to words to music in 1882, and it becomes the national anthem of Israel. But look at the wording, right? As long as in the heart within a Jewish soul still yearns, and onward toward the ends of the east an eye still gazes toward Zion, our hope is not yet lost, the hope of 2,000 years, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem, right? So that hope is not a far-off wish. It's an assurance from God that we're relying upon. So anyone who thinks Israel is not God ordained, you have to talk with God, not with me. Okay? So I hope this brought something to you, right? That the creation story is not so much about a textbook of how life came to earth, but how God starts our journey together with Him and how everything emanates from Him, not from something else, and that our hope is only in God. All right. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat area. I read every one of them. I try to reply as appropriate to all of them. Right? I get some weird ones, and so they get some weird answers sometimes, but I try to do that. If you have something specific you want me to cover, or you want me to look at something a little more in depth for you, let me know. That's where I get most of my great ideas here, right? We've spent a lot of time dealing with just 10 verses in Genesis, but this is the foundation for everything we're going to do. We got a couple more days to spend on Genesis 1, and then we'll move on. But this is foundational stuff. So I hope you're all enjoying it. If you would, please think about liking and subscribing to the channel. It does help us here, get the word out. Share this video with a friend. Let's see if somebody else likes this as well. That would be appreciated. Look in the description. I'm going to try to make sure I put the link if you want to get a copy of Logos software at a discount. There will be a slight discount available to you along with the free trial. So take a look at that. And hope you all have a great and wonderful day. And be blessed. Take care.